Good morning. We are live on the Falcons Podcast. It is a lovely Wednesday morning here in the Southeast. My name is Scott Kennedy. I'm in Atlanta. This guy over here is Nick Kendell. He's in Seattle. So we're kind of coast to coast in your football talk this morning. He's up bright and early for sure. And we got some things we want to get into today. But first, Nick, how are you doing this morning?
I'm doing well. A little frustrated. My alarm went off at 4:30 this morning, so that way I could feed the baby. Because Monday I went off at 4:50 and I could not get him back down. So a little earlier today, give myself a chance. Still not down. So sorry to my beautiful wife, who I'm like, okay, I got to be down here at 4:25. I didn't come down until 4:30, so if we're a little late, it's because of me. But what can you do, man? They're on their own time and agenda, and you do what you can to make it work.
Yeah, the sacrifices we make, and again, none of us can be here without kind of permission from the wives. So thank you, Natalie.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you, Natalie. Well, we go live every Monday and Wednesday and sometimes Fridays. I think we're probably going to back off the Friday show until we get through the summertime, just because unless we've got something that really needs to be talked about on Friday. And that's why we want to make sure you hit that like and subscribe button so you get the alerts. But right now we're Monday and Wednesday, but we go live because we like having the conversation with y'all. And there's a bunch of people that jumped in before we even got started. And I'm going to hit Edward Brown first because he's coming in with a super chat and comes in with the color with the big green. And he says, the second round was strange in that you gave up one of your third round picks to draft a player who you probably could have gotten in your original spot. Edward, I'm hesitant to talk about who you could have gotten. Was this too big of a reach? Even in my tirade after the draft, during the draft, the way the Falcons have handled the quarterback situation since March, I never once said you could have traded back and gotten Michael Penix, because you don't really know that for sure. You just don't. What I keep on saying on this, Edward, is if you love the guy, get the guy. Now, the question for me is, to move up from 43 to 35, did they give up too much? And the question will always be, Edward, man, here's some of the guys you passed on. Could those have been better picks? That's what we do here. I'm never going to complain about an athletic 300-pound defensive lineman. But the question becomes, like, would you have been better off at 43 and 79, I think it was? Was that too much to give up? Because that was a hefty price to pay to get the number 35 pick, Nick.
Yeah, Ruka a raw player to the football field still, and possesses all the athletic traits, measurables you could want. 34-inch arm length, really good year the last 2 seasons at Clemson. Still pretty raw as a pass rusher, but the tools are pretty special. And I do agree that it is a hefty price. I've always been a fan of Rook Ororo, though. The traits, at least, I do wonder sometimes, how he can use his hands and extend. Sometimes he's a little bit he has length, and sometimes he's too okay in matchups not utilizing it. I have like too many belly bumps out there with the offensive line, which you do not want when you have length like he does. But yeah, if he was your guy, I understand it. I agree, though. Trading up in general a lot of times adds risk. Don't know if he'd be there in the third, though. I would say that's one thing that
he was saying with the original pick with the 43rd.
43rd?
So you would have had your extra pick, and as he comes back in and says, sure could have used that extra third-round pick to grab a corner or a wide receiver. So, yeah, at 43, would you have been able to get him? I don't know. That's one thing. I can't say that with certainty, So I've never once said you could have traded back and grabbed Michael Penix. That would have been nice if you could, in a perfect world. We've said that about the Denver Broncos all along. What's a perfect scenario? Trading back into the 20s, getting Bo Nix, and getting another second-round pick. You don't know for sure that you can do that. And if your convictions are that this is the guy, then you need to take him. Trust your board on this. Take him and don't risk losing him. Because as Terry Fontenot said, and I agree with him wholeheartedly, about the Michael Penix pick, was – if there's a bunch of people in this room that love this guy and we don't take him and he goes on to be a star somewhere else, that's unforgivable. And I agree with that. I do. So the questions I have, and this is the fun part about doing NFL draft, is you're like, all right, if you're at 43, ooh, Jackson Powers Johnson right there. My goodness. I mean, you want to talk about best prospect available, possibly. But then, your safety was there, went at 47, Tyler Nubin. The corners, Max Milton was a player we liked, went in that number 43 spot. You needed a corner. And then you look down at the 79 spot, I think was the number pick that the Falcons gave up. That was a well-traveled pick because I think it eventually ended up with the Colts. It went from Jacksonville to Atlanta to Arizona to the Colts. They took an offensive tackle. And a few spots after that was Roman Wilson, the wide receiver we really like. So are you better off with two guys that could probably see a lot more snaps this year than a rotational DL and Max Milton and Roman Wilson? Again, or are you building for the future by restocking the defensive lines?
And you'll never see me get too upset about heavily investing in the defensive line. If you want to invest in there a year or two earlier and see where you're at, because they are developmental positions for the most part. And also, I will say that between pick 35 and 43, you had a serious run on defensive tackles there. So you guys obviously kicked it off there with going a row, but right after that, the Commanders trade up and take Newton. You have Sweat come off the board there. You have the Rams give up. You talk about giving up a lot. The Rams gave up a lot to move up for Fisk. You could have had options at Chris Jenkins, Mason Smith, Michael Hall, but you went up and got your guy. I think I do agree, though, with Edward on the whole. Just in general, there's like a overconfidence in trading up. Like, we definitely evaluate these guys much better than everyone else, where I probably would have rather had 45 and gone with the multiple options there, the multiple dice rolls. But one thing you can say on the other end is that they had conviction about a guy and they went up and got it, and they didn't give up anything too crazy to do that in the end. Right. So we'll see what happens with Ruka Rororo. The trade's been made. I think you should be excited about the player. And if you get a chance to go back and watch Clemson this year, if you're kind of bored at summertime, let's see what we got with Ruka Rororo. I'm sorry. He is not number 11 on that defensive line. That is Peter Woods. That's we'll be talking about him in 2026. But
in the first round, Leaf comes in. He says, just because you like a player in the draft better doesn't mean it's an overpay. The scouts might know something we don't know about Rook. And we're not talking about players in this case, Leaf. We're talking about spots. Because again, if you hit, then it's never an overpay. That goes without saying. We're talking to get from 43 to 35 is 79, generally considered too much. Generally considered, that's expensive. That was a good trade on paper for the Arizona Cardinals to be able to get 79 to 79 and 43 for 35. So that's the question. Could you have gotten a little bit better value? The players, you don't know until 3 years. That was what we talked about on Monday. The draft grades are about immediate impact and filling needs. How you actually grade a draft will be down the road. Is that an overpay? At the beginning, it looks expensive. Going from 43 to 35 costing you a third round pick. That looks like an overpay. Time will tell whether it was money well invested or not. So there's two different things we're talking about here, Leaf.
And again,
when we talk about the overpay, because if a guy hits, it's never an overpay.
And we listed those defensive tackles that they picked Rook over. You mentioned all the other directions it could have gone, but for me, they identified a singular defensive tackle that they said this guy is better than all this next crop of them that went in the next 15, 20 picks. And if he is substantially better, or even just an obvious better than those guys, then I think it's a fine move for what is becoming, in my opinion, Scott, maybe the fourth most valued position on the football field right now. I mean, a really good defensive tackle. They're getting paid. I think the only positions are getting paid less than are, of course, quarterback, wide receiver, and edge rusher. So it's a valued spot right up there with offensive tackle, in my opinion.
Trenches. Coach coming in says, morning, fam. Have a great show. Win the day. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the support with you coming in. Want to say hello to some more folks that have come in nice and early, but thanks again to Edward and Coach for the support early. Dave was in here nice and early, and good to see you, Dave. Victor, he's already doing all kinds of general managing. He says, good morning, guys. I'm thinking about some feasible moves. Edge, Carl Lawson, safety, Simmons or Diggs, cornerback, Witherspoon or Gilmore in a trade for Burks or Hendrickson. What do you think? I think Burks is the one I feel most strongly about in there. Like, no. Treylon Burks, I would imagine that's who you're thinking of. He was kind of a flop last year with the Titans, I believe. Almost forgotten where he got drafted. He ended up being taken in the 20s and kind of disappeared. Was it?
I think that was
did
2
Burks
years
take
ago
him to
now.
the Texans?
He went to the Titans because he was like it might have even been the pick replacement when they traded AJ Brown to the Eagles. That might have been 2 drafts in that go already, Scott.
Is it really? Because he's struggled so much that all I know remember about the name now, Treylon Burks, is when he was drafted, he was a first-round pick out of Arkansas, Deebo Samuel / Cordero Patterson type, toolsy, and he hasn't done anything. He's been the B word right now. So no, I wouldn't look at him at trying to move the needle. If he was a late round pick swap to come in, and if he doesn't make the roster, you cut him, fine. I'll look at anybody. That's what we do. When you're scouting, that's your job. I'll look at anybody.
I can't think of anybody.
Where's Gilmore right now? Is Gilmore still a free agent?
I am not sure what's up with Stephon Gilmore. I know he played with the Cowboys last year. Maybe he's still out with Dallas.
He's been on 1-year rentals for the last 3-4 years since he left New England.
Yeah, he might be a free agent. I mean, he mentions all these guys still. As far as Burks goes, I always kind of look at where offensive minds came from, their origins, and what type of archetypes they've used in the past. And I can't think of anybody in the McVay tree that matches a Burks type. I guess maybe you could argue that a Deebo Samuel with the 49ers, but they're not exactly the same, even though they come from the same school or tree. What McVay's done with 11 personnel and the type of weapons he's used is different than what Shanahan's done with his 12 and 21 heavy personnel stuff. So, I mean, obviously, if you're talking about a 6-round picks type of thing there, maybe that's something you can mention. Burks is on the way out, I guess, with Tennessee signing Tyler Boyd yesterday. But like, as you said, if it's a cheap move, that's something I would be interested in, but not really a needle mover, just a dice roll.
Yeah. And Gilmore is a free agent right now. So there will be moves made. There will absolutely be moves made. There'll probably be 30 transactions before August 1st for the Atlanta Falcons. So stay tuned on those.
And the one that stands out for me there, Scott, is Hendrickson. However, it sounds like that despite him wanting out, it's Cincinnati's not answering the phone. Same thing with T. Higgins. They're making a move. If he's available, you can trade 2nd-round pick, a 3rd and a 5th or something to go get him. 2nd's probably a little expensive considering what we know how valued picks are compared to veteran players. But it does not sound like Cincinnati is picking up the phone. They're kind of known as an organization that's not always the most player friendly, and they are not handing out the deals right now, so to speak, to Higgins, obviously, and Hendrickson as well. So maybe it's going to be a weird year there, dynamic wise, but they're making a run. They're not for sale.
Yeah, I agree. And good call on that. Coming back to Hendrickson is, yes, would love Trey Hendrickson. That'd be awesome. But it sounds like Cincinnati's going to hold on to him. You may not like it, but it sounds like that's what they are doing. Zachary Smith coming in with a super chat. He says, "Really catch you guys live. Just wanted to say thanks for always for adding a great show for us. Keep up the great work." Well, Zachary, this helps us keep doing that. That's for sure. The support that y'all show, we've had a lot of growth over the past, especially really. I bet I'd have to check back, but our numbers, our views, and all that have basically doubled this winter and spring. So it's taken off with the quarterback change, the big draft, the head coaching change, and Nick and I have been here, had been grinding, and thanks to people like you, it's growing, and we're really happy about that. I'm actually trying to add an evening show or two. I've got a young guy that's working with me that has done some guest appearances and stuff, and I might talk him into doing his own show. So we'll have some more stuff on my channels. We'll see. He's coming to Atlanta soon. We'll see if I can't talk him into it, but certainly appreciate it. Greg Custom Kicks is here too. He says, "Good morning, guys. I enjoy listening to you when I'm customizing shoes. It fills my sports hunger for the Falcons." Well, we're glad you're here. If you're over on YouTube or Instagram, check out Greg's channels, GQB Custom Kicks with a Z at the end. And then getting into the topic of the show, which was Bill Barnwell's ESPN, he basically did a winners and losers of the draft, and the very one at the top was Kirk Cousins. And he just leads it off by saying, well, you can't say you're surprised with, him being the number one on the list. You don't need me to reiterate the shock that came when the Falcons drafted Michael Penix Jr. with the number 8 pick. And we won't get into all of that. But he talks about as Corey here says, remember when Kirk came on and he says, you can win a Super Bowl when the head coach and the GM were all aligned with the same vision and on the same page. Welcome to the Falcon way, Kirk. So yes. And let me get your thoughts on this. I've given a lot of thought to it, Nick. I've had some time since I picked out the topic, but the biggest loser in the NFL draft is Kirk Cousins. How do you react to that?
I think that it's possible on multiple factors. Number one, I mentioned on here a bit, but I don't know who mentioned it. I want to give them credit, but it's a real interesting point to make. The locker room dynamic. When you are Kirk Cousins, you're coming into a situation where you have no credit with these guys other than what you've done elsewhere. You have no relationship with them other than, hey, I'm coming to Atlanta, excited to work with you, text kind of thing. He's coming off an Achilles. He's not even going to be there to work with the guys, OTAs, training camp, probably still working back. He's
there throwing, so we'll see how much he does. He's there. So that part of it, I definitely don't buy. As Michael Penix is going to get all the number one snaps, and they're going to be saying that he needs to be the starter, and Kirk's going to be sitting over there twiddling his thumbs, and then he's going to come in and start. I don't necessarily buy that one for sure.
Yeah.
And the general manager is basically Terry Fontenot came out and said, no, Kirk's our starter. This is our starting quarterback. So he has backed Kirk Cousins.
Yeah.
As the starter, at least, to be the starting quarterback.
But these guys don't know Kirk. And you got a young quarterback coming in a franchise. When you take a quarterback at 8, they're expected to be a franchise savior. And Penix is one that, throwing against air looks pretty damn phenomenal. That arm pops. So I would be curious what how that impacts the locker room. If we're going to see, factions develop, especially if things start off a little bit slow or, there's questions there. Some guys might be like, let's get in the young guy, man. His arm is way different than the old guy, Kirk Cousins. That's a weird part of it. And also you passed on potential offensive tackle, potential pass rusher, potential pass catcher that could have further empowered Kirk Cousins. So it's obviously I don't think he can be the biggest loser of the offseason considering he got paid huge money. Good for him. But as far as empowering him in the locker room and empowering him to succeed on the field by adding another difference maker, definitely an opportunity cost there. If Penix hits, again, won't matter. Who cares? Because you have a long-term option at quarterback in that case. But I understand what Bill Barnwell is getting at here as far as the personal reasons and the on-the-field reasons.
Barnwell, and I'll have a write-up for it later on allfalcons.com, but Barnwell immediately starts getting into how quickly can the Falcons move on from Kirk Cousins, in the trade. And yes, we've said 2 years from the beginning. We've said 2 years, or else they're probably going to do something with that contract. He breaks down the cost after 1 year, after 2 years, the trade, et cetera, et cetera. So my thoughts on this are, obviously it's not the same as you've got an established quarterback who's put in his time and you're drafting his replacement like Matt Ryan. Hey, Matt, you've been here a while. You're getting older. Your contract's a little tough to swallow here now after all the extensions. We need a succession plan. This was a recruitment. All the promises you make to somebody when you're trying to recruit them as a free agent. And part of that appeal, part of that trying to get that person here is like, listen, these are all the things we're going to do for you to be here and to go out a winner. We want to win. We want to do this. And then to turn around in the draft and not do those things, that makes you a loser. That puts egg on your face. Now, again, is he the biggest loser in the NFL draft? Again, there's plenty of people in here saying it, so I don't necessarily have to. John says it. Good morning, Scott and the Falcons family. Paid $90 million to say he's not a loser. And again, he's John Brooks says Kirk Cousins isn't the NFL's biggest loser, and this unnecessary dragging of Kirk Cousins needs to stop. Here's what I want y'all to pay attention to is when you get into these discussions online, when you see the comments and stuff, because there will be underneath this chat after the fact, people will come in. If we write a story, they'll come in. Watch the negativity towards Kirk Cousins. That can't be why you just signed with the Atlanta Falcons. People are blaming Kirk Cousins for this. It's like, listen, if I go to an organization and I've got 3 or 4 to choose from, and I pick you guys because you're going to back me with this, this, and this, and we're going to go do great things together, and all of a sudden you go back on that right away, yeah, I'm feeling a little shocked on this. Now, I'm getting paid really, really well to do it, so nobody feel too sorry for me. I get that. But when you're talking about, again, unconventional, recruit a guy, it's not just about, hey, every quarterback has a successor. You recruit a guy because you want to go win, and then you immediately draft a successor. That comes off as a little dishonest. Here's $100 million. Get over it. I get that. And at the end of the day, Atlanta Falcons fans don't care about Kirk Cousins anymore because he's Kirk Cousins, but they care because he's got that bird on his helmet. And he'll be gone, and they'll be happy to have Michael Penix. So, again, who does that hurt in the draft? Kirk Cousins. But Falcons fans really don't care. They don't care about Kirk Cousins, and that's okay. You haven't had any reason to. He comes in and plays lights out, comes in and plays like Chris Chandler did when he came to Atlanta. And I don't think if he was first year was 98, but goes and plays like that, he'll go out warmly. But right now, there's no bond with the fans. There's no reason. And anytime anybody hears Kirk Cousins was shocked, Kirk Cousins was surprised, people react negatively towards it. So, yeah, I get it. Biggest loser in the NFL draft is Kirk Cousins. Biggest winner in free agency, though.
Yeah, I mean, he's on the football field, maybe not, but at the bank account, fine. Also, Scott, if you remember when the signing first happened, a lot of people were not wanting that. They were wanting Justin Fields. They were wanting something else. A lot of people wanted to trade up for Drake May or Jaden Daniels or something. Obviously, that would have been unbelievably expensive in hindsight, considering what the Patriots reportedly turned down from the Vikings. And that would have lined up more with going with the Michael Penix. So I think a lot of it is probably also people who were out against signing Kirk Cousins from the start, circling back around and doubling down on that, which I understand. If that, again, it's how does the vision make sense? You can hear what Raheem Morris is saying, and if it works out, that's great, but there's no guarantee it works out. That's the thing. You have to invest in the quarterback at some point, and you are sitting 8, and I get it, but there's risk always. There's no
the question's always going to be, and there's so many different ways to do this. There is no one right way to build a team, or else someone would have already done it and just kept on doing it. It's the opportunity cost. All right, if you liked Michael Penix, invest that free agent money into other players. Get Michael Penix. And people say, I saw the comments. There was a comment on YouTube. I don't remember who it was. Like the thing about his age is just ridiculous. They can keep playing until they're 35, 36. I agree with that. Nick and I have talked about that before. I don't really care if I'm not worried about missing years. Now, Nick's point is there's a growth curve that he's afraid that you're missing if they're coming into the league this late, and they won't keep improving at the same rate as a younger quarterback who is kind of at the same level when he's 21. Okay, I get that. The point for me is if you want a 24-year-old quarterback, he should be more mature. He should be more ready to play. I want him playing now. I want him playing now. And I've seen it written before, and it wasn't Barnwell, so I'm not sure why I read it just today, but it was today. But I think Slim Slugga may have asked me or somebody about the Albert Breer article and what the Atlanta Falcons, how did they go about getting Michael Penix? And my big takeaway on this was the coaching change made a difference. The fact that Raheem Morris comes in on January 25th, that Zach Robinson comes in on January 27th, that they come in so late. I think they say, we've got money. We need something now. And then let's go through the evaluation process. Oh God, we've got to have this guy. If this is year 2 of the Raheem Morris regime, they don't sign Kirk Cousins. That's what I believe that, Nick. And as Mike says, Kirk's a professional. He's got 95 million reasons not to be mad. Guaranteed. And it is actually 100. I've been saying 90. That $10 million roster bonus in 2026 vests in 2025. So if he's on the roster in 2025, year 2, he gets that $10 million in 2026 guaranteed. So it really is $100 million. So yeah, he's paid handsomely to deal with it. Don't yeah, we get that. We do. We absolutely get that.
Mm-hmm. And he's still the guy. I mean, he's got a chance to get on the field and hold him at bay. I mean, the kind of like what we saw with, again, I know it's not the example. You kind of don't like the example, Scott, but the other way, the Jordan Love, Aaron Rodgers things. Rodgers was coming off some downish seasons when the Packers did end up taking Jordan Love, and that move ignited him. And he ended up going on to win back-to-back MVPs after the drafting of Jordan Love. Not that Cousins is on his way to win back-to-back MVPs, but he's got a chance with his play to hold him back multiple years. We say, what's Kirk Cousins here? 2 more years? Heck, it could be 4. So, I mean, he's going to be the one to determine that.
Nick, if he's 2 and he's successful, he will be beloved.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and if he's stunk, it didn't matter if Penix was here or not. Mm-hmm. He wasn't going to be, because he hasn't built up any good feelings with the Atlanta fan base. So there's the risk there. But I get it. I don't think it's a big surprise. I wasn't surprised to see that Bill Barnwell had him in as as the draft's biggest loser right there at the very top. That shouldn't have surprised any of us. That was the perception coming out of the draft. I was kind of hoping to move. I wanted to hit on this because I like Bill Barnwell. It's from ESPN. This is a number 1, but I'm ready to be done talking about Kirk Cousins and Michael Penix and the process. We're on record. We know how we feel about that. Let's move on to some other things for sure, and we will absolutely. Michael Ronquillo says, as Broncos fan, he wants to sell everybody. He says, get behind Kirk Cousins because he gives you the best chance to win NFL games. Does he? No, I know he's a good quarterback. Unfortunately for someone like me, is I will always look back and think, what if? What if Kirk Cousins and the Atlanta Falcons are in the NFC Championship game and they're down 3 and they lose it at the very end? Goodness, what could that number 8 pick have done? What if Michael Penix is in and he's playing because Kirk Cousins has a setback? He doesn't play at all. Michael Penix looks great. What if they had spent that $100 million guaranteed across the rest of the roster? So there is no right way to do it. It's not how I would have done it. And frankly, over a longer timeline, I don't think it's how the Falcons would have done it either. But your quarterback room is in good shape. And that was the biggest hole you had last year, without a doubt. And go back to Monday's show, I think this is the playoff team. With whoever, either one of them at quarterback over 17 games. Wouldn't that be nice to be there in 2017 to get an upward swing after the last 6 seasons and 7-10, 7-10, 7-10, number 8 pick, number 8 pick, number 8 pick? Be nice to have a little change up. Michael Ronquillo, never change. You're always here for us. We certainly appreciate it for sure.
And Scott, at this point, shout out to Michael also. Appreciate you. That's a big time support for the show. So shout out to you. It would have to be an upset if the Falcons didn't make the playoffs, right? We talked about it last week. The Vegas odds, they're 3-1 over under.
That they make it.
What was that?
It's 3-1 that they make it.
3-1, crazy odds. And the difference between the Falcons win total and the next 2 teams in the NFC South, and the Buccaneers and the Saints, is as far as the win total is from the Falcons to the top over-unders in the entire NFL, in the Chiefs, 49ers, and Ravens. So it would be a massive upset considering what Vegas thinks of them. Now, granted, some of that's based not just on the Sharks on the one end, but also where the money's coming in. But really, you guys, it would be a monumental upset. And I would even say a failure with what they look like right now if you didn't make the playoffs.
Corey Carter comes in. He says, Kirk is a lame duck, and he knows it. The Penix pick was made with Terry and Raheem's best interest in mind. Well, that usually comes with winning, unless, you're trying to, Raheem's safe for 3 years regardless. So, Raheem's interest is I want to be winning in 3 years. And Terry, if you wanted to be really, really negative on this, Corey, you could say, okay, by drafting a quarterback that isn't going to play for a couple years, your general manager is safe until you see what you've got in that quarterback, which will probably be 4 years down the line. And then if he busts, well, Terry's out of here, but he just bought himself another 4 years of a really nice paycheck as a general manager of an NFL franchise. You'd have to be a really cynical SOB to think that. I have those thoughts because I am a really cynical SOB, but the other voice in my head says that's silly. Come on. My thoughts on this is that it really was a timeline in the coaching change, and that the scouting process, as I've seen other people put it, getting the rubber stamp from your coaching staff on these guys, the timeline was late because of the hiring. So do I think that Kirk Cousins would be an Atlanta Falcon if this was Raheem Morris's second year? No, I don't. You go Michael Penix and you spend a bunch of money in free agency. That said, Kirk Cousins' contract isn't awful. It's not that bad, and I've talked about that a lot. And this is still a good team. It's just nobody, there isn't anybody, even if no matter how you've come to grips with it and justified it and listened to the Atlanta Falcons, there isn't anybody, except for maybe one or two of you out here that say I told you so, that expected Michael Penix's name to be read at number 8. That was surprising. It was surprising to all of us. Yeah, Mike Harvey coming in with the super. He says, do you know why UGA has won 2 national championships in 90% of his games? Because no one is guaranteed a spot, period. The Falcons need to think and do it that way. Also, Mike, it'd be nice for the Falcons just to start winning seasons again. It's been a while. It's been a while, and they've never won a Super Bowl. That's the one that gets me a little bit, is why are so many of y'all and just willing to take what the organization has to say as gospel and this is the right way because they said so when they've had so little success? That's the one that gets, maybe you're younger and you're just not as cynical, but trust the coaches. I trust the coaches to do what they think is right. I don't trust them to get it right. And we're here to debate what is the right way to do it. Time will tell. That's the fun thing. Time will tell. That's the fun part of it. Georgia, Nick, I've said Georgia, Ohio State, and LSU are the 3 top jobs in the in college football, just because of the lack of in-state competition, the natural recruiting base. It's better at those 3 than any place in the country. And Georgia got the right guy in Kirby Smart. They got the right guy to head the program.
And if you didn't have the lack of distribution of talent available and NFL players were phased out every 5 years, and the developmental difference between 18-year-olds to 22-year-olds, you'd have competition every year in the NFL like college. It's a different game given the parameters, the age group of these guys, and the what's the word? Constellation? How talent just compounds itself. I mean, there's times with Alabama where, their second string maybe could have won a national championship or an SEC with those guys coming in there. That's a little hyperbolic, of course.
You don't have the constraints of competition in college football. Their only constraint is 85 scholarships. That's it. Everything else is kind of cutthroat capitalism, which to me is kind of fun.
And it might even be worse now. I mean, I kind of agree with you, Scott, as a fan of Iowa, which is not a little guy, but not a big guy. Ohio State this year is paying their quarterback room NIL money more than the entire Iowa roster for NIL money. And that's a Big Ten versus Big Ten team. So it's when you have programs like that with that amount of money, they can definitely compete and they're going to let the cream rise to the crop. But you don't have that ability in the NFL, right? It's a different game in how talent is acquired.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes with a bunch of mercenaries that can blow up in your face, so you've got to have buy-in too for the program. I can't just be having guys come in and out all the time. And again, we've talked about it. If guys are choosing just for money, that's the wrong reason. And that will blow up in your face eventually.
Colorado. We'll see what happens out there with Deion Sanders and the lack of recruiting, but all the in and outs of the transfer portal.
I see Michael Lewitzki. He comes in. He says over on Facebook, greetings from Island Mike. Is Calais Campbell coming back? I think when you draft 3 big defensive linemen, I think that closes the door on Calais Campbell. I think that room is pretty full. You've got Taquan, David Onyemata, Grady Jarrett, and then you just added Brandon Dorless, Zion Logue, and Ruka Rohoro. I think there's 6. I think the Zach Harrison is in there too. There's 7 that are 280 plus. I think the door is pretty much closed on Calais Campbell on that one, Michael. Corey, he's talking about some of the other the what do you call it when something blows up? Collateral damage of the Kirk Cousins stuff of, the free agency, and then, catching him by surprise, catching all of us by surprise. Again, Kirk Cousins was stunned. We were all stunned. Don't tell me you weren't surprised when Michael Penix's name was read. We were all shocked. How do you think this kind of backdoor move looks to potential free agents in the future? Kirk likely wouldn't have come here if he knew that you were taking the number 8 pick. And again, he would have gone someplace else that was showing, assuming the money was right. And that's how you fix this thing, Corey. You might have to pay a little bit extra. At the end of the day, guys are going to do what's best for them. $100 million guaranteed. When nobody else was offering more than 50, you were going to get Kirk Cousins. So that's how you might have to overpay just a little bit. But again, winning solves all. You got to overpay after 3 straight 7-10 seasons. Kirk Cousins helps and leads this team to 10-7, and they fall just short. You got Michael Penix in the wing, and you're bringing those guys in on free agent visits, and you say, Kirk's got 1 more year, but wait until you see this kid. Come to practice. Come watch him throw. Watch him do a session. Let's get on the phone with Michael. Oh, and by the way, we're going to give you, within 2% of the best deal on the market. It'll be all right. It will.
Also, quarterback's so different, right? All these other spots, it's like, oh, you pay a wide receiver big money and then you draft another one. There's still snaps to go around.
Yeah. Quarterback gets me double coverage, gets me less double coverages.
Yeah, exactly. Or you same with pass rushers, cornerbacks. Quarterbacks in its own box. I mean, we say that a lot on these shows, that it's true in so many reasons, for so many reasons. But yeah, I don't know if it'll have a big impact on the market. Time will play itself out. It won't matter. And also, it's kind of like, I mean, when Denver let Russell Wilson go, there's a lot of fans like, oh, man, what you're doing to Russell Wilson. Players aren't going to want to come here now. Players are still going to crud organizations all the time if those organizations are giving them the best contract. These guys are going to make the best financial decisions for themselves because you see all the time. It's a cutthroat league, and as soon as you start to become not as valuable or they can save some money on you, they will move on. So I just don't think that, maybe for guys on 3rd contracts that aren't looking as much for the money at that point, but looking to compete, those pure mercenary types at the end of their contracts looking for success, maybe that hurts you there. But even then, that's not going to be such a huge loss in the end. And that's more about if your team's winning or not and the culture you have here with Raheem Morris. So I don't think there's going to be massive ramifications from the player side. Now, could it be Kirk Cousins' agent doesn't want to work as much with the Falcons anymore and is going to be a little bit, harder with Fontenot and those guys? Maybe. I think there could be some agent ramifications to an extent, but not enough that it's going to really impact things, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And Dustin Perkins asked a question I don't really know the answer to. He says, sorry if I missed it, but what are your thoughts on undrafted free agent Dylan Leonard out of Georgia Tech? I don't know. He's a tight end, 6'5", 245 pounds, 41 catches, 400 yards or so. I didn't see his pro day numbers, had 1 touchdown. So again, I don't know anything other than his numbers, and then his numbers are just kind of meh. But I haven't watched Georgia Tech football in a while. I'll be perfectly honest with you. They've been, I wouldn't say unwatchable, but it hasn't been how I've wanted to spend too much of my time lately. I've watched less college football and even less Georgia Tech in the last few years.
I watched Georgia Tech, but only to watch Drake May this last year. So I couldn't tell you. I've only watched the defense. When it comes to undrafted free agents, or especially this year, like some of the 7th and 6th round picks, considering I have a newborn at home and I don't have as much time to sit there, watching plays over and over again on a undraftable grade tight end fullback type, I won't have an opinion until we get to camp or get to preseason when we can actually start to grade these tapes and these guys start to stand out. So sorry, Dustin, not that deep on the undrafted free agent class. A lot of times those guys overturn so quickly and don't make the roster or practice squad that I wait for, flash on the NFL field before I invest that level of time in those guys.
Yeah, and here's a pro day story that doesn't have any of his results. That's kind of not what I'm looking for. Draft profile. I don't see his pro day numbers on how he did. I could probably find it, but not right now. So apologies, Dustin. Hit us back up. We'll check it out on that. Mark Schrader says, good morning, Scott and Nick. Good morning to you, Mark. Hope all is well in Texas. It's supposed to get cool here in the next few days. So hopefully you've got a little cool front over there that's already on you and heading our way. So I hope you are doing well. Thank you very much. My friend, Jeremy's in. He says, stopping by to hit the like button. Thank you, sir. And one of the things I saw in here that I highlighted while you were talking were just, the trenches. Nick and I, we kind of joke that the theme of our show is trenches, trenches, trenches. Well, the Atlanta Falcons look to be in as good a shape as I can ever remember on the offensive and defensive lines. I mean, we might be able to go back to that 98 team. That front four on the 98 team was unbelievable. They were so good, and the offensive line was solid too. But this could be the best offensive and defensive line units the Falcons have had in my memory, which my memory's slipping, but the good ones tend to stick. When you think about the guys they have, there's some question marks at center, okay, but some question marks at right tackle, but not huge gaping holes. Caleb McGarry has played well. Drew Dahlman gets graded well. David Onyemata, Grady Jarrett, Taquan Graham, Zach Harrison. You got three big time, pretty decent investments on the defensive line. Your front four, 3-4, however you want to play it, are good. Now you've got depth there. The trenches look really, really good on this team, Nick.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it on Monday. You maybe don't have that true, transcendent all-pro edge type. A lot of times, one of those top 5 interior defensive tackles in football. Grady Jarrett's very good. We'll see what he does this season with a little bit more depth. Now that team's probably, he can get a little bit of a breather out there and whatnot, but he is a year older, and he is not somebody who is, I don't think, somebody who opposing offenses are like, okay, we have to take out Grady Jarrett. He'll wreck us at this point. He's a very, very good player, but I don't think a transcendent, defensive superstar piece at this point. But the defensive line looks really good. And it's a spot that, I mean, Scott, we talked about it on here. Why didn't you add an edge rusher or a cornerback? I hate to be that guy again, but tune in April 2025. Next year's edge and defensive tackle class looks pretty damn good, especially edge. If you're looking forward to, lay down a piece at a potential superstar edge rusher, next year has maybe 4 or 5 guys that would have gone before anybody this season at that position. So we kept talking. I think somebody asked us a question in this show, Scott, is this just a trend that's coming forward where the offense is going to be that much better than defense? Next year is going to be a boomerang, in my opinion, in terms of that. There's going to be a lot of cornerback and edge and defensive tackle talent at the top that would have been, I mean, if those guys were in this year's class, we'd have been talking about one of the best drafts in a long time. This was still a good draft because the offensive stuff, but the defense was lacking. Next year, edge rusher, defensive tackle, and cornerback's going to be great on paper. We'll see how the season plays out.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind some one-year veteran types, put in. The Falcons went with guys like Calais Campbell. They went with Bud Dupree last year. They did really good work for the Atlanta Falcons last year. Finding a guy like that at corner and safety for me would round out this defense. I won't say round out, but would be impactful, cheap additions that you could get to really improve the defense in the same way that you did with Calais Campbell and Bud Dupree. Some just pros in the secondary. JB 1521 says, we need the secondary field. I agree. You're counting on some guys. We'll see. They were talking up Richie Grant. He was better than we thought, and we've got big plans for him. We'll see. I'm not convinced he's going to be on the team. I watch what they do, not what they say. And if Richie Grant's striding out there on day one, then I'll be like, all right, I guess they were pretty serious about Richie Grant. Let's see how he has improved, because he needs to improve. You got DeMarco Hellams back there, but he's only got about 4 or 5 games under his belt, not a ton. So he's still pretty unproven. So again, a pro type of safety and a steady presence at corner, I think would go go really well. Corey coming in. Corey's still fired up. He says over under on when the population of Atlanta is screaming for Penix is half a game. I remember when the Vic apologists were like sizzle over substance. Some of it's already started to have Michael Penix come in and play, but that's not always a bad thing to have two quarterbacks. And the saying is if you got two, you don't have one. The Falcons have two guys that they're excited about right now. The last time they've been excited about one was probably 2017 Matt Ryan to a certain extent. There was some, we saw enough in 4 games from Desmond Ridder. We're willing to see more, but there was no, oh yeah, this is the guy. We're really excited about Desmond Ridder. It was more like, hey, just don't F it up. That was why are your expectations so low on Desmond Ridder? Because that's all he needs to do is just don't lose it. And this is a playoff team. Nick, guess what?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny to see just how, again, I think that interview with Raheem Morris really left an impact on Fontenot and Arthur Blank. The one when they didn't hire Morris and with Arthur Blank instead. He talked about needing a succession plan in place. That didn't happen. Arthur Blank comes in and you go with Mariota and Desmond Ridder as your expenditures. You went cheap. You went the budget option. You shopped at the Dollar Tree for your quarterback room and didn't work out. Well, we talk about the pendulum swing when something doesn't work out. Let's do the exact opposite. And boy, howdy, did you spending that money on Kirk Cousins and then a top 8 pick on Michael Penix. You did. You went and shopped at the bougie grocery store. I don't know what you guys have out in Atlanta. We have a place called the Metropolitan Market out here where it's 10,000. Maybe you have Whole Foods, but Met Market's even higher as far as what you're spending. And that's what you did, shopping at the grocery store with the quarterback market this season. You paid premium. Hopefully it works out. Premium expenditures tend to result in better results, but it's not a guarantee.
Probability. Yep. Probability. Brian Dunn, probability that we're appreciating the super chat. That's for sure. Thank you for the support. Y'all are killing it today. Making us feel really good. That's for sure. Might have to kick Nick out and I'll stick around if the super chats keep rolling in. And as he gets us fired up for Broncos for breakfast. So thank you, Brian. I'll keep an eye out in the chat. Steven, he comes in, he says, we're deep on the defensive line, but I wouldn't say good. A lot of unproven guys here. So Steven, I want you to think about this from a perspective point of view. If you've got 2 good defensive linemen, you're good. That's how hard it is to build a defensive line in the NFL. There aren't many defensive lines of the 32 teams that are better than Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata. That's it. We're done. They're good. Now you're building depth. You're building depth back there. So again, I would say that the defensive line, the way it's built, is arguably the strength of this team. Assuming everybody stays healthy, is the strength of this team, the way they can, when you can roll out Onyemata and Grady Jarrett and then back those guys with, assuming that they can live up to their draft billing, but Taquan Graham is good. Zach Harrison was really starting to come on last year. I think the defensive line is a strength of this team, and I would absolutely say they're good and they have some depth now. Yeah.
And again, defensive line is as much about that second unit as the first unit, Scott. I'll push back a little bit as far as if you have your top 2, that's great, but those guys are still eating 60, 75 at most percentage of the snaps. That's a whole other starter out there. That's a second string guy. So having that second string good, and that doesn't even talk about the probability of injuries. And when you, at some point, odds are when you have a position that is as rotational as the defensive line, you're going to have an injury happen. And how does that next guy step up? So I think it helps in the immediacy, but definitely helps long-term. That's one thing. We talk about the trenches as building a fire. I don't know about you, Scott. I'm somebody who can't leave a fire alone when it's going. I'm the guy at the fire, always. Maybe it's the ADD in me. I don't know. But you want to keep it fed. You want to keep it stoked. You want to keep it healthy, making sure that it's built in a way that it can be sustained. And that, to me, is investing in offensive line, but especially the defensive line. And maybe it doesn't align with this is our 1 year perspective, but none of the draft did. And we always talk about on here too, the draft is supposed to be about 2 to 3 years from now, where free agency is more about the immediacy. And Falcons did that on paper this season. So we'll see how it plays out. Mike Harvey comes in and says, Tom Brady said you win in today's NFL with offenses because the rules, a big hit by a defender, there's a penalty. You win with offense, not defense. You win with a superstar quarterback in the end. who's really beaten Patrick Mahomes over the last few seasons. The only time it has happened is when it's been with a unbelievable depth and dominance in the trenches on both sides of the ball. I mean, what did the Eagles have? Or I guess they ended up losing, Scott. I'm getting it mixed up there. I thought they won. They ended up losing still all the same. So really, it's just the way you win in today's NFL is if you have Patrick Mahomes, unfortunately. But I do think that.
Yeah, where did that Kansas City Chiefs defense finish last year?
Oh, they were good, Scott. They were very good. And they were able to not invest as much on the offense. I mean, it's still unbelievable that the Kansas City Chiefs won with that offensive wide receiver room as putrid as they were. But a different discussion there. I think
Kansas City Chiefs, for those of you counting at home, had the number 2 defense in the NFL in yards and the number 2 defense in scoring, and Patrick Mahomes. That's a pretty good combination. Now, I think the Packers tried to pull that off, Nick.
Yeah.
Where it was, let's try and build the defense, and then we've got Aaron Rodgers.
Mm-hmm.
And it worked to an extent, couple of 13-3 seasons. But yeah, it's not binary, y'all. Again, you know, I see people, it's like, oh, well, the conversations, it's like people aren't capable of seeing two sides of one thing. And I'm not talking about you, Mike. I'm talking about the comments I get afterwards. Like, well, the defense doesn't matter. Look, they've got a good defender and they still lost. Yeah, well, we shouldn't try and get defenders at all then. I mean, it's silly.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
and
balance is good. The quarterback is the biggest piece. I like defense too.
Yeah. And you can't be so putrid on one side and still win. Like, you need to be elite on one side and very good on the other. You need an A unit matched with a B unit on the other side. Hopefully 2 A units. But a lot of times you're not going to see that. And that doesn't even get into the coaching aspect as well. And we talked about it on here, Scott. I really view that if you only look at it the season and trying to build a team through the scope of who won the Super Bowl, I think you're missing some pertinent data in the end because of, I mean, how fluky can it be when the same team keeps winning over and over again? You see Mahomes winning, you see Tom Brady winning, right? It is the superstar first ballot face of the league Hall of Fame quarterback that ends up winning in the end. But I like to look at the Final Four. There's a little less noise and variance in the 1 game sample size when you look at that unit. So what did the Ravens, Bills, whatever, I can't even think of who lost the AFC Championship game this year. Was it the Ravens?
It was 49ers and Chiefs. Ravens, I don't know if did the Ravens get beat earlier than that?
I think it was because the Chiefs had the 3. I don't even remember. All I know is the Chiefs freaking won. But you typically look at the Final Four teams and how were they built. I think that's a little bit better of a sample. It gives you a little bit more power.
The Chiefs, Ravens, Lions, and Niners.
There you go. So I would look at those teams as far as the pathways forward, and I'd look at that, backwards. And those teams, especially the Lions and the Ravens, even though they didn't win in the end, very trench-oriented. Lions offense and Ravens defense. 49ers as well, very much defensive line oriented. So there's multiple ways.
And you think the Detroit Lions wouldn't have liked to have one more player on defense? Yeah. One more guy, probably they win that game, 34-31. They needed one more difference maker on defense, and they probably win that game. Again, there's balance in there. You don't want to be unbalanced for sure. Yep. So
it's just hard
when coming back in. He says, no problem, guys, about talking about Dylan Leonard. I just missed Denver having a dominant tight end, so I was getting into the weeds looking for any hope. My takeaway with the Denver Broncos and Sean Payton in the tight end position is he doesn't give a damn about the tight end position. That's my takeaway from watching Sean Payton was like, I'll just get a guy. I don't want to invest. He disdains the tight end position. And if a superstar comes available like Jimmy Graham, so be it. Otherwise, I'll pluck a guy off veteran free agency for $1 million and throw him out there.
I think that, honestly, Scott, I will disagree to an extent based on Sean Payton's history. It's just really what talent do I have at my disposal, and I will use them, which is a good sign for an offensive play caller. But when he was with the Giants as the offensive coordinator, he had Jeremy Shockey. His rookie season, he was unbelievable. That was the talent that was available, and he made it work. With the Cowboys, he had Jason Witten. That's who was available, and he made it work.
What kind of personnel powers did he have at the time?
I am not sure. I think
none. He had none. What has he done in 2 years to upgrade the tight end room in Denver? Nothing. That's my point.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's my point.
Yeah. That's fair. And you have the
I'm
Jimmy
not saying
Graham.
he doesn't use the tight end. I'm saying
Yeah.
he doesn't prioritize it as a general manager in team building with premium resources.
I won't have as strong of a take on that. I think that the sample in Denver is not long enough.
Let me rephrase.
Say that.
He hasn't. In 2 years at Denver, he hasn't.
And they did pay, just going back to the Saints, Jimmy Graham, pretty good to keep him around. They used Colston / Thomas as a little bit hybrid tight end, wide receivers, big slot kind of stuff. And also, I think they paid Daniel Graham pretty good money. They also paid Cook pretty good money out there in New Orleans to come out and play Jared Cook. I think the bigger point here is that how many tight ends are actually needle movers in the NFL. I mean, typically you have 3 or 4, despite the expenditures on the position. It's a lot like linebacker, in my opinion, where it's a bunch of serviceable guys, and you have a few superstars, but those guys, hard to predict who they're going to be.
So on that note, we are going to get out of here. Rookie minicamp starts. Daniel Flick is coming down to cover it for all Falcons, and I'll see if I can't get him to jump on the podcast too. Maybe we'll talk a little bit of that. So we'll have it covered, allfalcons.com. Just a quick reminder, your lioncoffee.com promo code of 20% off is still good through this month. So hit lioncoffee.com, use the promo code GoFalcons20 to get 20% off everything through this month, except for with the 100% Kona and Cases. Everything else you can get, including the Cafe Honolulu that I'm just finishing right now. It's about empty. So check out Lion Coffee. Support them. They support us. And I know y'all support us too. So it's a big help. We're going to hop over to Mile High Huddle right now. We will be back on Monday. I'm not planning on being here Friday unless something big happens, and we'll talk. So make sure you hit those notifications, like, subscribe, and share. On that note, want to say thank you to our Super Chat superstars like Dustin coming in a couple times, Mike several times, Brian Dunn, nothing to say, just support for the show. Love it. Mark Schrader out of Texas. We've got Corey Carter, Mike, Craig Custom Kicks, Zachary, the coach coming in. Edward Brown was getting us started. And, of course, Michael Sunrise Ranquillo coming in with the red hot pink super chat coming in, benefactor of the show. So thank you so much. We're going to hop over to Mile High Huddle. We will see you next Monday to talk rookie minicamp. Y'all have a great rest of your week.
Peace.